So Rob, for the record,
Sure.
can I get your first and last name and how to spell it?
Yeah, my name is Dr. Robert Layne, Robertlayne.
So Dr. Layne, right now you guys have reached a milestone. Today you guys announced at I think 10 a.m. that you guys have reached that 1,500 shelter bed goal.
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys got there, given that about a week ago we were about 890 beds in?
Yeah, so as of last week and tonight, we'll have 890 beds available this evening where people can go and get a safe night of sleep. And in a few weeks, we'll open up the Southeast Grand Recovery Center, which will be an additional 200 recovery-oriented beds. So today we announced the remaining tranche of beds that will be a strategic mix of permanent beds and flexible beds. The first is at the Centennial Neighborhood Shelter, which will be in District 1 out in East Portland. And then we have a city-owned property that we've identified that will be 200 additional beds. And then we found additional capacity at some of our existing emergency shelters that will be an additional 180 beds. So as we add those all up, we're at 1,566 on December 1st, which was the mayor's goal and vision. So we're pretty excited.
And flex beds are just beds that can be available on demand if there's need?
That's correct. So flexible beds are beds that can be increased or decreased as utilization rates also increase or decrease. So one thing that we are pretty adamant about is that these types of beds are necessary to really meet people where they're at. The capacity level doesn't need to be at 100 in, or 1,500 during August, but it does need to be there in January when it's at its wettest and coldest. And so we need the ability to be able to bring up capacity when needed for those colder months and decrease capacity for those warmer months when they're being less frequently used. And I know that that's been a hot topic across the city, but it's also something that we've been planning for since its very beginning of this plan.
And when we talk about utilization, can you tell us a little bit about utilization rates across the city right now?
Yeah, utilization rates have been increasing pretty substantially over the last couple of months. So we're planning on releasing November's utilization rates later this week and are pretty excited because we're seeing internal numbers that show that the total number of participants is increasing week after week, day after day, which means that our shelter beds utilization rates are also increasing in kind of the same manner. So while we knew that utilization rates were going to be low, especially in August, especially for sites that needed some ramp up time, that's not been the case for Northwest Northrop, for example, which was our most recently open site in the Pearl District, which started at 75% and has been increasing in terms of the number of participants week over week.
Got it. And before November, do you have any sort of broad or general estimate of how much you'd say utilization was across the board?
Well, utilization really differs from site to site, and that's for a lot of different reasons, whether that be because there are the type of beds. Really, these types of sites create their own communities. They have their own kind of demographic flavor for the people that live there. So if you go out into the neighborhoods where people are living unsheltered on the streets, they've created networks, families. And so as people are going to shelter, they're really using word of mouth about what the shelter looks like, who's there, who do they know that's there, who's the provider. So that can differ from site to site in terms of what that utilization rate looks like. But what we are seeing for utilization is that it's increasing pretty substantially. At the end of October into early November, we were seeing about a 73 to 75% utilization rate across the entire portfolio, and that number has been growing towards the end of the month.
And can you tell us a little bit about this 1,500 number in reference to unsheltered homeless, bigger picture? My question is, does having these 1,500 plus beds mean the end of unsheltered homelessness?
What it means is a step in terms of unsticking the system, right? Unsheltered homelessness is just a symptom of a larger problem, and getting shelter beds in place is one step at trying to kind of shake up the system a little bit to provide something that that people need to just simply survive. Think about it this way. If you go to one of the county shelters right now, it is the Cadillac of sheltering, which means that you get all the bells and whistles, you get wraparound services, you get services and support. But if you don't get into shelter and you're on the waiting list for that shelter and you're 6 months out, you get the streets, which means that you're more likely to die, you're more likely to suffer health incidents, and you're more likely to suffer mental health issues. So it can't be yes or nothing. It needs to be something in a continuum of care. And so if we're able to get people into shelter, we can kind of unstick the unsheltered part to move them into the next step, which is 24/7 housing or shelter, then into maybe supportive housing, and then into permanent housing. So it's really about trying to move people through the system without necessarily just saying, hey, we know what the gold standard is, but you can't get in there yet. We have to have something in between. It can't be all or nothing.
You know, some people outside the Northrop shelter were just telling me a week ago that they're concerned that wraparound services, mental health supports, job support, these resources aren't coming as fast as the beds are. And so they're wondering, are we just shifting people around? What do you say in response to that?
Yeah, we don't think that we're shifting people around. So overnight shelters are really an opportunity to get people connected to services and support. So it's the first opportunity to make a connection with folks. What we were hearing from people that were coming to shelter was that, hey, I'm getting out of addiction treatment, I'm getting out of substance abuse treatment, and I really don't have any place to go. Can you help us? And so we've been listening, and that's when we turn to recovery-oriented beds, provide people a sober night of safe sleep. So at Southeast Grand Recovery and the City Team Grand site, those are opportunities to really connect people to that services and support that can get them into large-scale treatment.
Another concern people have been telling us about is that all of these beds are available, but people aren't necessarily willing to use them. How do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think that that's not really borne out by the data, right? So we've had 3,174 unique individuals that have used our shelters. In October, we provided over 8,000 nights of safe sleep. So that number really doesn't bear out because we really have a lot of people utilizing our particular overnight shelters. So I would push back against that because we're seeing that people are using them and they're also moving towards other services and support. What we're looking forward to is working more closely with the county to understand, okay, now that they've used our overnight shelters, what other services are they using? And so we're in negotiations with the county to figure out that number more fully.
How are you guys communicating job opportunities to people? Are there such opportunities that you guys are able to connect people with who come into the system?
It's a little more piecemeal in terms of job opportunities. So what we do have is the day center at the Northwest Gleason Oasis, which is our Portland's first outdoor day center. That's where people and providers and service providers come in. We have resource fairs where we can connect people not only to services, not only to support, but things like job opportunities and workforce development. Portland Solutions has been working with Central City Concern, especially on some additional projects that have utilized workforce development as a way of getting people that are experiencing homelessness connected to new job opportunities.
And for our taxpayers, can you help us understand how much all of this costs and out of what bucket this money is coming from?
Yeah, I don't have those details right in front of me, but I'm happy to get it to you for your viewers.
Sounds good. And you know what? Just towards the tail end of my questions here, one concern that the county has voiced out is that the number of people entering the shelters keeps getting bigger than the number of people they're able to safely get out of shelters and into housing or who are able to get themselves off the streets. How do you address that problem?
Yeah, I think the next step is housing. So while we have been focused on providing life-saving shelter right now, the next focus is on housing because the way that we end homelessness is housing, full stop. So that's the next step that we are looking at. So we are aiming to utilize the full tenacity and grit that we've been using for getting these shelter beds open to moving towards housing development and doing that in a lot of different ways. One of the things that we have done is that we have put into place a housing strike team, whose mission is to essentially find ways, both creative and standard, to provide more housing and for individuals across the city. Things like single room occupancy, home sharing, and things like vacancy utilization for vacant spots that are already open. So it's using those types of creative kind of solutions to kind of get into the next step, which is housing, and that should be the end goal.
How soon can we start seeing steps in that direction?
Hopefully soon. So this particular mayor has been very clear that the first year of his administration was going to focus on getting shelter and shelter capacity up and running, and the next would be focused on economic revitalization and housing. And I think that that's going to be the same type of, full, ambitious kind of goals that he's going to be utilizing.
And my last question for you is in regard to the day center that you brought up. I know there's mental health supports there and addiction recovery supports there. Are you guys going to be expanding upon that?
We don't have any plans at this particular moment in time, but we are looking at a lot of different partnerships, and I know that Urban Alchemy has been doing a lot of work to try to create different connections to other nonprofits.
And just to follow up, are people really using those services?
We understand that they are. So, we have somewhere between 700 to 800 unique guests that come through the Northwest Gleason Oasis on a daily basis, and a lot of them are utilizing services where there's a list of people wanting to utilize them on a daily basis.
Anything else you want to add, Rob?
I think that's it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really helpful.
Thank you, Tanvi.